Welcome to episode 66 of Marathon Talk, powered by Abbott World Marathon Majors. As we get closer to some big marathons in April, we speak with nutritionist Meghann Featherstun about her methods to make sure you're fully fueled ahead of your next big race.
And before that, we'll have a roundup of all the news from around the running world. Sydney prepares to welcome the GOAT down under. And we have an on-the-ground report from the LA Marathon. We'll talk about some of the big races that have gone down in the last few weeks. Finally, we've got news from the distant future as Beijing launches the first humans versus robots half marathon. All of this and more on Marathon Talk. Dina, what have you been up to?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this episode. First of all, I feel like we have so much to talk about. Spring marathon season and races getting underway. But this last weekend, I was in Chicago for the Bank of America Shamrock Shuffle. It's put on by the Chicago Marathon event crew. And it was such a fun celebration. Even though it rained and it was bitterly cold, they like to say it's the coming of spring, this race, welcoming spring. And I guess it's in my assessment of it, the days are getting longer, so more opportunities to get out and run. But I got to run the 8K. It was the 20th anniversary of my American 8K record there. It's my only record out of the 10 that I have once held that still stands today.
Wow.
But I ran it much slower this time around. I ran with Galen Rupp, two-time Olympic medalist Galen Rupp, and Tina Muir from the UK. Yes. She was on the World Half Marathon team representing Team Great Britain. So it was really fun to run with the two of them, and they dragged me to an age group win there in the Windy City. So it was really fun. I had a really good time. Yeah,
check you out.
Yeah. It was by default, of course, because I said to them, like, kind of struggling here.
That's not like when you ran with me, was it? I didn't drag you to any records. Well, maybe most stops in the Porta Johns. But when congratulations on a fantastic win.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
it was a really fun weekend. Just being with the running community again, super exciting. But I was thinking of you and how your running is going. How's your Achilles feeling?
It's all right. Yeah,
it's
all right. Actually, yeah, it's okay. When you catch something early enough, it doesn't bother you, does it? So, if you catch it early enough and you really listen to your body, which I think I did, few down days back on it. I'd say my running is yet to click, but I'm all right with that. I've started doing a little tempo run in the week and I'm getting faster, week on week. So I'm doing what I guess people would think of as like a pre-season phase of just gradually building, still enjoying it. Nothing too sinister is entering my running repertoire yet. Anyway, enough about us, Dina. Shall we look at what's been happening since our last episode? And there's a big bit of news. Eliud Kipchoge is heading to Australia for the 2025 TCS Sydney Marathon. I know, what a fantastic bit of news. He's the former world record holder, 14-time major marathon winner, has announced he's going to take part in this year's race. He's going to run for the first time in Sydney as Sydney's first as a major and his first race in the Southern Hemisphere. I didn't know that. We've had Wayne Larden, of course, who's the race director of the Sydney Marathon, on the show as a guest, and he said having Eliud race the Sydney Marathon in its first year as an Abbott World Marathon Major is a dream come true. His presence will elevate the event to new heights, bringing an unprecedented level of excitement, prestige and global attention. It'll inspire the nation to get the running community excited about the opportunity to run with Eliud. When Kipchoge himself was asked what he was looking forward to most about his first trip down under, he said, "I especially want to see kangaroos. I don't want to come to Australia and miss seeing kangaroos." He's going to be joined by more than 35,000 other athletes that will take part in this year's event, and over double that applied for a place in the ballot.
Those are extraordinary numbers, right? I mean, we'll talk more about numbers and the mass participation that is happening globally in the running community. But when I look at Eliud, I mean, we thought he was going to retire. Now he's back for Sydney's first go at an Abbott World Marathon Major. The only one prior to this that he hadn't run was New York City. So if this is his sixth major, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but if this is his sixth major, is he going to get one of those beautiful 6-star medals?
I see where you're going with this. I see where you're going. It's a good question, but unfortunately, even though you are the GOAT, the answer is no. Right? It's a no. I did ask our main man at Abbott World Marathon Majors that very question before we recorded. I was told that the 6-star medal is only given out to athletes, including the GOAT, who run the original 6. So that's Tokyo through New York, right? So the original 6 World Marathon Majors. And it won't be until the end of the current candidacy process for Cape Town and Shanghai that a new, hopefully 9-star medal featuring Sydney will be distributed. So Eliud will have to wait a little bit longer to get his hands on another, probably his most coveted medal. But I didn't know this. You can get a special collectible 6-star coin display medal where you insert a coin for each of the majors into the slots on a collectible medal. Not quite the same, but nonetheless, he might like it hung up on his wall anyway. Dina, you were in LA last weekend.
Yes, it was the 40th running of the Los Angeles Marathon presented by ASICS, and I was part of the local broadcast. It was a 5-hour broadcast, so a little marathon in and of itself, a marathon of the mouth, I guess you could call it. And it was a spectacular race because American from Team USA, Matt Rickman, won the men's race, and it was only his second marathon. There hadn't been a U.S. winner in this race since 1994, Paul Pilkington, 31 years ago. And Matt Rickman just took the race by storm at like the 16-mile mark and just was grinding his way through the streets. The thing about Los Angeles is they have a race within a race. So the women started off 16 minutes and 5 seconds ahead of the men. And then the goal is that they're coming to the finish line together. And Matt Rickman, the men's race was so aggressive. The women's race was plodding along. It was Tijaness Tulu who won the women's race in 2 hours, 30 minutes. So they were slow and the men were fast. I was shocked that Matt Rickman ran 2:07:56 to win that race. That is a fast time on a course that does not cater to fast time. So it was really, really exciting.
Is that a debut? Do you know? I didn't see that he ran a very fast half.
It was his second. It was his second marathon. He self-coached, and in the U.S. half marathon championships just 2 weeks prior, he was 6th place. And he said he took it easy there because he didn't want to sabotage his marathon. So just a really good head on his shoulders, very disciplined, and so he ran brilliantly. I cannot wait to see him run in the future. I think we have a lot of good racing to see from Matt Rickman.
Yeah, I did see a little bit about something in LA last week, but I wasn't sure about it. Do you know much about legacy runners?
Oh, yeah. There's 93 runners who have run every edition. So for 40 years, they have been running every edition, which is insane, right? I feel like we saw on the broadcast the gentleman who played the trumpet for the national anthem ahead of the race was a legacy runner, and then put down his trumpet and jumped into the race. And there was 2 people that were affected by the California fires. One of them lost their house, another one displaced because of smoke damage, who came and ran the 40th edition of the race. So the fact that these life things happen, they're such such well-rounded people, but they used the race kind of to show their resiliency. It was a really beautiful showing of the 93 runners that towed the line again. And London, I think all of the majors, with the exception of maybe Boston, all the majors probably have some sort of group they celebrate who have run all editions.
Well, it seems quite a lot. Do you know, 93 is heavy. That's a lot of people that have run every edition. I wonder if has there been any breaks in LA Marathon? I don't know the answer to this, Dina. So, has LA Marathon gone on, happened every single year since 1986? Because in London, there's a group of runners called the Ever Presents, and they're individuals who have done every single London since 1981, and there's only 6 of those. So, there's a lot more people that have done LA. In the London Marathon, it's Chris Finnell, who we have had on Marathon Talk many years ago. Chris has done all of the editions of the London Marathon. Largely, I think he probably stands the best chance of keeping going because he was only 22 when he ran his first London. Right, it's not all about people that do loads of marathons every year, though. In 2025, the TCS London Marathon is set to be the biggest on record. The race is taking place on the 27th of April, and it's expected that there's going to be in the region of 56,000 finishers. That is the biggest marathon ever. Wow, these races are getting big, Dina.
I know. And the previous record was held by TCS New York City Marathon just back in November when they hit 55,646 finishers.
Of which we were 2 of those finishers.
We were 2 of them. We were in a record-breaking race. We got to put that on our resumes, Martin. But it was only a few weeks before that at the Berlin Marathon that a record was set there in September. So when you look at these numbers and you look at Sydney that we opened the show with having 35,000 and 70,000 more putting their name in the hat to run there, these are big, big numbers. And it makes me so excited to see. I'm going to blame the pandemic, right? Because it was something people could buy a pair of running shoes and get out there and kind of run some sanity back into their lives. And so that might be responsible for some of the boom. But it's not just the quantity of runners we're seeing. We're also seeing quality because course records and national records and world records are falling on any given weekend. So we're looking at quality and quantity and how everybody can kind of be a part of that mix. It is a really exciting time in our sport.
There's a few things I'd like to see. I mean, look, I think people are longing for experiences that bring them together. Right. And they want adventure and they want experiences. And of course, if what are you looking for when you do a challenge like a marathon? You're looking for a destination, you're looking for an experience, you're looking for something that you can do shared with other people. And of course, big major city marathons often bring a sense of achievement, but also a sense of, vastness and togetherness. So perhaps that's a reason why, there is a bit of a boom in participation sports and including running at the moment. I wonder, and I don't have the answer to this, it might be something that Statman Stu can provide. I'm very interested in the breakdown of the demographics. So of those numbers, where's the rise coming? Are more younger people doing marathons compared to previously? Are there increases across age groups? And not only that, but what happens to the event? What are the things that an event needs to think about when numbers increase? So, for example, for many years, of course, London was not wave starts. It was corral or pen starts, but it wasn't waves. Now London is waves. What that means, of course, is that it can increase the runner capacity. So we're seeing numbers going up. I think London this year had something like 550,000 ballot entrants in the ballot wanting to run. It's common for numbers to go up. So I guess it's responding to the numbers of entries, but that can also cause all sorts of wider challenges. Let's call it a challenge for races as well, because often when people run, they bring people with them to watch, right? So it's not just the people participating, but it's also the people enjoying the whole experience. And there was a great article in the latest issue of Majors, and in it interviews Marcel Altenberg. He's a crowd management specialist, right? And he's employed by many of the world's biggest races, including London. And what he does, he gives some insight in Majors about the science behind how you control crowds of that size. We'll put a link to that article in the show notes, because, of course, with 56,000 runners, you've not only got the race, but you've also got all the surrounding infrastructure of moving large numbers of people and keeping everyone safe and excited. Right. We'll put that link in the show notes.
Yeah, check out that article called "Crowd Pleaser" with Marcel Altenberg, because he looks at crowd safety and risk analysis, and he studies and made algorithms on why people gather, move, and how they behave. It was a really fascinating article. I really got a kick out of it. This last weekend was the Barkley Ultra Marathon, dubbed the race that eats its young. It took place at Frozen Head State Park, Tennessee. Nobody finished. It is one of the, it was really the hardest race in the world. And last year there was 5 finishers. If you remember, most notably, It was Jasmine Paris, the first female to ever win in the race's history. But no one finished this year. So sad.
What I like about it, Dina, is like, it starts, in the most peculiar way, and I think it's with the lighting and sounding of a conch and kind of the lighting of a cigarette, and it's at a gate, and there's these sort of famous quirks. Well, now they're now infamous, right? Just a few years ago, they were unheard of. Mm-hmm. With events like that, of course, it becomes more about controlling the secrecy of an event. We've just spoken about huge mass participation events. This is very different. It's very select. It's quite small. It's a challenge to get into. It's not really clear how you enter. To ensure you've done it, you have to collect pages out of a book. It's very tough. There's no course. So it's kind of very different. And this year, nobody finished. So for many years, no one finishes because it's just too difficult to make the cutoff and go out again for another lap, as it's a lapped course and you have to complete each lap before you can go out again for another lap. So I think that, with that, it instills a sense of intrigue and a different sense of adventure about the event. I kind of like that. One other event, Dina, just to finish this, I'm not sure where this one's going, but Beijing have announced a robot half marathon. I know we're in the age of AI and all that, but finally, something different to finish this week. Next month, on April the 13th, which is the same day as the Paris Marathon, Beijing will host the first ever human robot half marathon. 12,000 human runners and humanoid robots, it doesn't say how many, will face off in a groundbreaking race to a finish line. Cut-off of 3:30 is in place, not Boston qualifier yet. Participating robots must have a humanoid appearance and be capable of bipedal walking or running. Robots with wheels are not eligible to participate. And there's prize money as well. I wonder, can you just enter your own robot? I don't know the rules of this, but, maybe you can design a robot and enter it.
It's fascinating that humans are creating computers to be smarter than us, and now we're creating robots to be faster than us. Pretty soon, I feel like we're just weeding ourselves out, right? Is that what's happening here? We're weeding out humans, people.
Let's see how that one goes, shall we?
As we enter an exceptionally busy period on the marathon calendar, how athletes fuel for races is vital. Nutritionist, runner, and 6-star finisher Meghann Featherstun of Featherstun Nutrition joins us to offer advice on how to best prepare your body before you take on the marathon distance. Meghann, welcome to Marathon Talk.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I feel so lucky that we get to travel the world together sometimes, but that I get to talk to you twice in one day. I was talking to some of your running clients earlier this morning. So it's fun that we get to do this twice in one day. Thanks for packing me into your day.
Oh, we loved it. And the group has so many great little tidbits of education from you that they can't stop talking about. So thank you.
Oh yeah, and our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this conversation too, because nutrition is such a part of the game in the marathon. So let's just dive right into fueling for that long run. Like, what are the key principles that you talk to your clients about that they should be following in training? And obviously, when I talk about long runs, I'm simultaneously talking about the marathon itself because the long run is kind of the practice for that. So what are some of those key nutrition principles that you preach to your clients?
I think nutrition for endurance running is not intuitive to a lot of us. Like some of the principles that we were taught about solid nutrition growing up need to be bent a little bit and changed and thought about in a different direction. So, very few people nail long run nutrition without some intention, without some education. So, I think it's really fun to kind of talk about some of those differences because things that maybe were told to us in the past that were like, don't eat so much salt, it's not great for our health, or don't touch simple carbohydrates, right? Those two things are actually incredibly imperative to our performance in a long run. So, we want to be a little bit more strategic when it comes to that. So, if we're kind of breaking it down, I always tell people, let's focus on the night before our long run first. Let's practice what we plan on eating or similar to what we plan on eating the night before our marathon so that we can decide, is that working for us? How does that feel? And then two, we want to scale up carbohydrates. We want to scale up sodium so that we can store some of those extra carbohydrates as glycogen, which is the fuel that we're pulling from our muscles while we're running. And then two, if we have a little extra sodium and we're well hydrated, we can store some extra sodium too. It's called hyperhydration, so that when we're sweating, we've got a little bit of a buffer of some extra sodium, some extra fluid. We've got those extra carbs on board. So while it might seem a little counterintuitive to have, 3 cups of pasta with some added salt in the water when you're boiling it with some, salty tomato sauce and some extra fluids on the side, that's going to actually set you up to be able to perform much, much better in that long run. Not only feel better and bounce back and be present in the rest of your Saturday or Sunday, but also it's going to allow you to push your fitness and gain more fitness while you're out there if you're well fueled and well hydrated going into it. So kind of want to start that night before, and then morning of, same thing. Make sure we're hydrated. We're getting some simple carbohydrates, practicing what we want to eat before that marathon. What does that look like? And then also practice race day fueling during the actual training run. So oftentimes I see people, oh, it's just an easy run, I don't need to fuel, or oh, it's just 16, I don't fuel till 20, but we do know that we really do have to train our gut to figure out how to take this amount of fuel and how to tolerate it, how to open it at race pace, or can we swallow it okay, where are we storing it in the clothing that we're wearing. So there's a lot of practice involved. So we don't want to wait and do that for one 20-miler before our race day. We want to make sure that we're practicing the night before, the morning of, during, and really setting ourselves up for success, not just for race day, but we can also gain more fitness if we're keeping on top of that throughout training.
Oh my gosh, there's opening question. There's so much to unpack there. So now our podcast is 4 hours long. Just kidding. I'm going to ask, just because a lot of our listeners are getting ready for Boston and London marathons, is it too late to tweak those things? We're couple weeks out from Boston, an extra week out from London?
Yeah, I always say, those peak weeks, like 3 and 4 weeks out, like that's where our biggest workouts, our biggest long runs are. I mean, we can practice fueling in our workout midweek and in our long run on the weekend. We have some wiggle room to play with it. I always tell people, like, make sure you nail race day nutrition like 4 times, right? And so if somebody's listening and they're like, oh, shoot, I haven't, we can still do 2 more, right? We still have 2 more weekends to really nail it and to practice it, and make sure that, you're getting what you need and it's working for you and that you have a plan.
Right. And if it's not working right now, like still tweak it, right? Like
Yes.
keep tweaking it, because even if you get it right once, so the chances are you'll get it right on race
Exactly.
day as well. Getting it right 4 times is obviously ideal.
Mhm.
When you were talking to some of your running clients earlier today, you emphasized carbs, fluids, and sodium, and needing those, like the balance of those three things during the long run, during the marathon. So what is that ideal balance for those elements?
It's really interesting because when I started doing this, oh gosh, I took a sports nutrition class in grad school, which would have been 15 years ago now. We used to think that the body could only absorb like 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And that was kind of the recommendation. But we've had tons of science that shows if we have the right ratio of like glucose to fructose, we can push that over 100 grams per hour, which not saying all runners need that, right? But the range is really like 30 grams to 120 grams an hour that we're seeing people take right now, which is huge. So I mention that because I think each of us need to slowly find that sweet spot. So if somebody right now is listening and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what my sweet spot is, right? Like start around 50. Like 50 grams of carbs an hour is usually pretty darn good for somebody running a marathon. Then once you've done that, you tolerate it, you feel good. I do see people pushing up into like the 60 to 70 grams of carbs an hour on race day. So we have some wiggle room to play with that. We have so many fuel options these days to easily get that
Right.
in. A combination, like you said, of gels, chews, drinks with carbohydrates, all that kind of stuff. So, first and foremost, I try to get people to figure that out, the cadence they need to take their fueling, what type of fueling works for them, how much per hour does that mean for us. And then what's even more individualized is the hydration piece. So, genetically, we all have different sweat rates, different sweat compositions. So by that I mean how much sodium you're losing. Some of us are much saltier than others. So how much fluid we need is going to directly relate to how sweaty are we? And most people know that, right? When I ask people, I'm like, hey, compared to the people you run with, are you the sweaty one? If they pause, they're not. If they're like, oh,
Yeah.
yes, I am, then we know that, that's obviously going to take a very different strategy to make sure we're staying hydrated during, or I should say, minimize dehydration. We're all going to end dehydrated at the end of a race. So, playing with that a little bit. And then, too, weather on race day. So, we know Boston last year was way hotter than everyone had trained through, and some people really struggled. So, if you find out that race day is going to be warmer than what you have trained through, we really need to fuel early and often, take electrolytes earlier, probably take more electrolytes than we're maybe trained with through the winter, and just be really diligent about that so that hopefully the dehydration doesn't negatively impact our performance quite as much as it could if we weren't mindful of it.
Right. And when Megan's talking about, are you salty? It means like, does your hat have little like white crystals on it when you finish running, or white crystals on the side of your face? It's not your attitude. We're all a little salty in our attitudes. But yeah. And then I guess a big part of that, if we are going to be getting into some warmer marathons, especially when people are training through the winter months and then they finally have that warm day on marathon Sunday or Monday, that, a big thing a big mistake that I've seen is that people don't feel thirsty at 5K because they drank in the morning. So they pass that first hydration station. So what do you say to people to kind of like reinforce, like, I know you're not thirsty, but
Yeah. I try to get people to start fluid early. So at Boston, that's at mile 2 that it's available, and either water or Gatorade Endurance is available every single mile after that. At London, they're a little bit further spread out, but at London, you get to grab an actual water bottle. So you can carry it with you for a little ways. So I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. I wish that more races had that as well. And they do have the Lucozade, which is an electrolyte drink available at I think 5 different stops throughout the race. So it's there. I think, like you said, we need to drink with a plan when it's warm. And that means stopping early, because unfortunately, once we get too dehydrated, our stomach doesn't empty very well. So if we wait to drink until we're like, oh, shoot, I'm feeling it, I'm thirsty, I feel awful, that fluid is going to sit in our stomach. It's going to slosh. It's not going to feel great. So we want to try to minimize how dehydrated we get early in the race so that hopefully we can continue to tolerate our fueling, throughout that entire race, even if it is warmer.
Yeah, and for listeners, if you are not carrying your own hydration and utilizing the sponsor hydration available on the race course, like please order it and practice in your long runs to get your gut used to it. How do you manage? Because I'm sure you work with runners who have a range of ability and times that they're going for. When is it simply hydration and carbohydrates in their bottles? When do they incorporate gels? When do you encourage whole foods? Because there was a time, I was joking before we started recording, when Martin and I were running the New York City Marathon together, that he was talking about stopping for a burger and a coffee, a sandwich and a coffee, and I was saying like, if we're going to do that, then let's do oysters and martinis. We didn't do any of that. We just had what was available on the course. But when do you encourage simply fluid, which to me seems the most easily digestible, with the incorporation of gels, which I would do later in the stages of the race for some added calories and caffeine, and never really done whole foods. But when would you encourage whole foods in a marathon?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. It's incredibly individualized from person to person, but a lot of it's going to depend on, first of all, what do we tolerate? And then also, like, what is our intensity that we're running out there? And how long do we expect to be out there? So when we look at sports nutrition recommendations, two of the big factors in how much do you need, when do you need to take it, is the intensity we're running at and how long we're going to be out there. So those are the two things that I kind of talk to people about. And one of the things that I notice a lot is our fitness level fluctuates over the years, right? A lot of people take breaks for whatever reason, whether it's forced or chosen, right? So when we come back, our fitness might not be anywhere near what our PRs are or where we would like to be, but maybe we're running that marathon to the top of our fitness at that moment. And I always want to remind people, like, I don't care what you've ran in the past, but if you are running that specific race to the best of your fitness ability from start to finish, you need to fuel like you're going out there for a PR, because that means our intensity is higher. And the higher our intensity, the more carbohydrates we need. So that's where it's like this fine line between, not just what we want on the day, but like, what are we asking our bodies to do and how prepared is our body to do that versus I'm pacing a friend and running 2 hours slower than I normally would. Yes, that's going to be a very different fuel need. We're not going to need quite as many carbs. We could potentially have real food out there because of the intensity is lower. So we have the blood supply to our GI tract to digest that whole food. Or I have some people that do like a walk run while they're out there, and they're out there for 5 or 6 hours. So, like, of course, we need a granola bar halfway through there. We're missing a meal. So, a lot of times,
Right.
kind of looking at that duration, that intensity, and kind of trying to figure out what makes the most sense.
I know. And as you're saying that, I'm like, I haven't done this, but what would be my go-to? You spend all morning like drinking all these sweet drinks and these goos and gels. And I think I would go for a breakfast burrito or French fries. I think just something super salty.
French fries.
I think that's what I
always want French fries after a race. I still remember I ran Boston in 2013 and they like totally locked down the city. We weren't allowed to leave the hotel, so we couldn't go to our reservations afterwards. And I remember I was so sad because I had just come back from foot surgery and I was like so excited to be there and to finish. And I'm sitting in there in the hotel and I think the waitress could see I was upset and she was like, "What do you need?" I was like, "I need some French fries and a glass of red wine." So she put a thing of red wine in front of me and a massive plate of French fries. And I was like, "I'm happy now."
Yeah. My world just turned around. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That is great. So speaking of French fries, carbs are still super critical and vital to marathon running. Mm-hmm. What are some carbo loading myths, like or truths? I mean, maybe both can exist at the same time, because there's still the pre-race pasta dinners that take place, whether through charity events or the races organizing one themselves. So what are some myths and truths about carbo loading?
Yeah, I think two of the most common myths that I hear is, one, we just need to eat a big carb dinner the night before and we're good, right? That is not enough. We need more than just one meal beforehand. Plus, if you have a big pasta meal the night before, that's a lot of digestion overnight. I typically try to get people to eat their meal like earlier so they have time to digest so that it doesn't interrupt their sleep the night before the race. So that's myth number one, is one pasta meal is not enough to carb load. We need more than that. And then the second one I hear a lot is there used to be some research about 20 years ago that talked about depleting our glycogen stores before we carb load. So we used to tell people for like 3 or 4 days to eat no carbs and to continue to train. And then like 3 or 4 days before your race, then you would pick the carbs back up. And the thought was like our glycogen stores are so empty, they're really spongy. So they're going to grab onto even more glycogen than our body could hold if we didn't do that. So I still have a lot of people like, do I need to deplete beforehand? And there's been a ton of research done to show it's no better to deplete first. And I don't know about you, but race week nerves are high enough. There's travel, there's, same thing with caffeine. People are like, do I need to stop caffeine? No, like you can still keep that up. So I think it's really important that we don't do anything wild with our nutrition the week before. So we don't need to deplete our carb stores before we carb load. I think it's an additional stressor on the body. It decreases our immune system, and then we're traveling. So it makes me very nervous when people think they need to do that. So I think those are probably the two biggest myths about carb loading.
I am so relieved to hear you say that because that just never felt right. That was a really big deal when I was at the height of my career, that people did that with both carbohydrates and coffee. And I'm like, two things that I adore, and you're going to take them away when I'm in a taper and crabby anyway.
It sounds like a terrible mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed like a stress. Like they say, don't do anything new on race day or even race week. And that seemed like you're just throwing your body into a tizzy. So it never felt right to me. So I'm so glad to have your backing on that. What do you suggest to people who have gluten intolerances or sensitivities when eating that plate of pasta and eating those pretzels? Like I'm just thinking of some of my go-tos when that isn't an option for them. What's a good carbohydrate source?
There's still, I think white rice is one of the best things we can carb load with, which is naturally gluten-free. So that's huge. There's also a lot of gluten-free cereals. I have a lot of people that will do that because the thing with the carb load is we want to prioritize carbs, but if we get too much fat and too much protein with it, I mean, we can have some. We don't have enough space to get the carbs that we need. So we want things like white rice that is just carbs, right? Very simple. And sometimes gluten-free foods like the graham crackers and things like that add a lot of fat to them to try to get the right texture. So we, kind of keep it simple with the gluten-free, but also, I've worked with a lot of people that are gluten-free, and a lot of times we'll rely on liquid calories. So like some of the higher carbohydrate drinks that you can kind of concentrate like maltodextrin or a cyclic dextrin in can help if somebody's really struggling, or juice, or like a Bolthouse Farms like smoothie type thing. Like all those things work. So, I always recommend for anybody, not just gluten-free, if we're really struggling, liquid carbs don't trigger our fullness response quite as much. So that could be something that would help.
Yeah. So you touched on really good key points for pre-run, getting in the carbs and the sodium and keeping that simple. That's a really good tip. What would be something you would recommend for recovery? Because recovering from those long runs are going to set you up for a better week to help you prepare and get stronger for the marathon. And even after the marathon, recovery is such a big part of the game, both in sleep and nutrition. So what do you recommend as being optimal for recovery?
Yeah. And I think especially in this day and age with like protein being the star, it seems like, as far as like nutrition goes, a lot of people are like, oh, I need protein to recover my muscles. And we absolutely do. But we also need carbs to restock those glycogen stores. So they've done a lot of studies where they look at people who are training back-to-back days, and we deplete our glycogen stores in 10 or 12 miles, maybe less when we're training because we're not fully stocked. So if we don't replace those, we feel very flat and our performance isn't as good the coming week. So I often see that people aren't getting enough carbs post long run. They aren't getting enough protein. And then two, the timing of it. Like the sooner we can get that nutrition down, the faster we're going to recover. And most of us are bouncing right back and have another big week of training coming up. So we want to make sure that we're eating in a way that allows us to not just recover from what we just did, but prepare for what we're about to do next week. And oftentimes I just don't see that people are getting the quantity of food down. And I think a piece of that is a lack of understanding of how much we actually need. And then two, a lot of people don't feel hungry after a long run. Like there's a lot of hormones spit out, especially higher intensity long runs, where we just have a blunted response to our appetite. So sometimes it's really hard. We have to know what we need and do it and find a way to get that nutrition in instead of waiting to feel hungry. Because if we're waiting to feel hungry, we've probably waited too long.
Yeah, like a good, maybe good advice would be making that smoothie or that sandwich before your run so that it's readily available and the intention is there when you get in the door. And the timing of it is really important. I should try to ask the head physiologist at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, Randy Wilbur, once shared with me a study that showed, just in a nutshell, at the end of a workout, they were taking core muscle biopsies of people that just had to sit around and rest, and another group that had to eat a balance of carbohydrates and protein. There was numbers spit out, but those go in one ear and out the other with me, and sleep. And the people that did that immediately after, they started to recover, and they were already showing like stronger muscle tissue and adaptation process happening so quickly. And the significant part of this study was that the people that didn't do that, that just sat around and drank water for 2 hours, even though they weren't putting any added stress on their body, their muscle biopsies were worse. So their workout was over, but their musculature was continuing to break down without that immediate fuel source, which I just thought was so fascinating. It really emphasized the need to get in that balance of carbs and protein as quickly as you can. And you're right, so many people are just, their tummy is upset because they've just been drinking all those carbohydrate drinks or worked out too hard, and they just don't feel ready to consume anything. And it's a critical mistake, but planning early is a really great tip.
Yeah. And I think that's the perfect example for like our workout's not finished till we refuel. Like that's the end cap, right? Like we need to make sure that that's included, and then we're done with our workout and moving on with our day. Yeah.
That is great advice. If we were to jump into, like we've done pre-race and post-race recovery, do you see in runners themselves an area that they can focus on, not just balancing fluids and sodium and carbohydrates and proteins, but like a vitamin or a deficiency? Like I know for a female training at altitude, I always checked my iron stores to make sure they were okay. Luckily, I was able to stay on top of that. But what do you see in runners? Is there something that's chronically depleted across the board?
Yeah. The two things that I look at the most from like a performance and overall health standpoint for runners are, like you said, iron status, which ferritin is directly correlated with our performance. And there was actually a study that came out recently. So ferritin is our storage form of iron. So when we're losing more iron than we're taking in, that's the first place our body's going to go to grab some iron to make those new red blood cells or to keep our hemoglobin where it needs to be. So it's like looking under the hood a little bit deeper if we look at ferritin. So we knew that ferritin was correlated with performance. So, when somebody is looking for the high end performance, both in training and in a race, we want to make sure that ferritin is an adequate level, which, like you said, is different at altitude, different for males versus females. Each person seems to have a better ferritin level once we figure that out and notice kind of where you perform the best. But there was a research study that came out recently that actually looked at low ferritin levels, and that people's VO2 max was lower than they would expect, and that they couldn't increase that VO2 max with adequate training when ferritin was low. So it's not just like, oh, I can't hit a certain performance in my race. Like we're spinning our wheels a little bit in training if we're training hard and putting all this energy into our training, but our ferritin is low. So I thought it was a really interesting study, not just, like I said, for that one performance, but also for an entire training cycle, making sure that we're keeping an eye on our ferritin, which a general practitioner is typically not going to draw. It's something you have to ask for, or something you purchase on your own, or something you really fight for if you've got a great relationship with your primary care provider. So it is something that we need to be aware of. And then two, like the normal range for ferritin, like some labs even say 9 is normal. 9 is horrible, right? But your doctor might be like, you're in the normal range. So you need to understand how we interpret that. Like females need to be well over 40, males need to be well over 70, and some even do much better, even way higher than that. So I think it's important that we educate ourselves on where does this need to be, because we might not be getting that guidance just from our normal, everyday practitioner. So I think it's good to understand that, because we're putting so much time and energy into training. It's like, let's not, spin our wheels here just because we need a little more iron in our diet.
Right. And so getting would you recommend like a yearly blood test to just see what's happening internally? Because by the time you're feeling those like dragged out effects of low ferritin levels, it's going to take a while to get those
Right. It
benchmarks
does take a
higher.
while.
So yeah. So
It can
like once a year asking for
I would say
a
once
blood
a year
draw?
for sure. And then if you've had a history of low iron or you feel like you have the symptoms of it, like I like people to get it or get it tested before a big training block. So it can take 3 or 4 months, sometimes longer to get it where we want to be, depending on how low we are. So we want to catch that early in our training so that we can start supplementing. We don't want to find out 6 weeks before our race that we're low. Like that's just going to screw with our mental game, because there's not a ton we
Right.
can do in that amount of time. So I do try to get people to think ahead. Like, okay, I have a race in April. I need to test this in late November, early December to see what I need to be doing.
And so what are a few foods that come to mind that someone could eat and consume to boost those levels?
So we have 2 types of iron in our diet, heme, which is from animals, and non-heme, which is from plants. So we actually absorb a lot more of the heme iron. So if you're up for it, any type of red meat is going to be the greatest source of heme iron. And then like dark meat, like dark chicken, dark turkey, pork tenderloin, things like that are going to have some. For the more plant-based, lentils are the absolute highest. And then dark chocolate is actually the next highest. So just eat some lentil pasta, lentil stew, get some dark chocolate after that. But then, of course, things like beans. Greens have some. You just have to eat a ton of greens to get it, which is difficult. Dried fruit, like dried apricots, are a good source. So there's lots of places to get it. It's just we don't absorb. We absorb like 15% of heme iron and like 7% of non-heme. So it's hard to get enough. So if we're really low, we probably need a supplement, but it's nice to be able to manage it then through diet once we get it where it needs to be.
I make a really good lentil shepherd's pie.
Ooh.
So St. Patrick's Day has passed, but maybe I'll share the recipe with our listeners anyway. Meghann Featherstun of Featherstun Nutrition, thank you so much for embarking your wisdom on all of us today. If guests want to find more nutrition advice from you, what's the best way to follow you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Featherstone Nutrition. And then I have a website with tons of free resources, including a carb load calculator. So you can make sure you do it right this time at featherstonenutrition.com. So lots of hydration and carb. And I'm just super passionate about people having access to the information they need to make themselves a better, healthier, stronger runner. So there's tons of stuff up there, including recipes and all sorts of stuff. So dive into the website if you haven't and follow on Instagram. And I'd appreciate it. Yeah.
Meghann, thank you so much. Can't wait to see you at the races.
Yep. Thank you.
We've mentioned these a few times already today, but Boston and London are on the horizon in April. Many other marathon events are also taking place around the world. And a lot of people have been really putting in the training miles, been tagging them in our runs. This is kind of peak. It's peak season, isn't it? Last week, we put a call out on our social channels asking you to send in your finish line feelings. First up, Davina Spriggs ran the Rome Marathon. Here she is with an update on how she got on.
Okay, Rome Marathon, done. Look at the medal. Lovely medal. Lovely route. Had wind, rain and sun today. Bit of a tough one. It feels very, very humid now. I am sweaty, but really, really nice route. Crowds were amazing. Very, very historic. Probably one of the most historic races I've ever run. Yeah, amazing. I'll leave you with just one thing though, cobbles. Cobbles are not easy to run on, and yes, it was flat, but I would not say this is a PB route, but lovely, lovely, beautiful route. Loved it. Thank you, Rome.
A brilliant feedback there from Davina. Dean, have you ever run on cobbles?
The only time I have was at the London Marathon. I feel like previous editions of the course, we ran through cobblestones after the Tower Bridge, like around the halfway point. It wasn't very comfortable. I'll say that. I mean, your marathon feet are tender, and running on the cobblestones was a little cumbersome. Yeah.
Yeah, that little section around the Tower of London and Tower Bridge was taken out, wasn't it? Deliberately, I think, to make the course a little bit smoother and a little bit quicker. Yeah.
Another submission from the Rome Marathon, Joshua Ogier ran his first marathon. Here's what he had to say.
Hello, I'm Josh. I just ran the Rome Marathon. It's my first marathon. I ran it in 3 hours 23, so pretty happy with that. The overall atmosphere at the Rome Marathon is pretty good. Very well organised, to be fair. You weren't waiting around for too long. You pretty much saw every single thing here. Started off with the Coliseum right here, where we also ended. Very well laid out. Water stations, pretty much almost every other kilometre for the last 20 kilometres or so. Yeah, really good. Recommend it.
Thanks, Davina. Thanks, Joshua, for your submissions. Remember, if you want to send us a quick review or a race, DMs are always open.
From Instagram, John Hill did the Great Welsh Marathon 2 weeks ago. He described it as a lovely event with some cracking scenery. He finished in 2:58:38 and was second in his age category.
Is that Dina, doesn't sound to me like a where you would describe the scenery cracking.
Cracking.
John Hill did. Yeah, John did when he ran in Wales. But would you go cracking scenery? That.
I think my body's cracking. I'm not sure the scenery's cracking.
Right, we got a lovely message from Brian Hawkins. He says, "My name's Brian. I'm a regional Marathon Talk listener." What does that mean, Brian? "I'm 45 years young, getting faster over my distances, which is a bonus. 2:58 for the marathon, which I did 2 years ago in Manchester. 2 attempts at the 2:50 barrier. The last one was last year. Trained for Yorkshire. Training went perfectly. Got very sick in the taper. Didn't make the start line. Disaster, Brian. But I promised myself I'll be back for the marathon in 2026, and this message is my guarantee." We'll hold you to that, Brian. Send us a message in when you're racing healthy again. Well done to everyone who's tagged us in a run in the last few weeks. Remember, if you've got a race on in the next few weeks, whether it's Sao Paulo, Vienna, Milan, Belgrade, Brighton, anywhere in between, tag us at Marathon Talk in your run. We'll try and give you a shout out on a future show.
That's it for another episode of Marathon Talk. If you're joining us for the first time, make sure you subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Leaving a 5-star review would be most welcome.
Remember our social media channels. Follow us to stay up to date on everything that's going on in the show. Search Marathon Talk on Insta, Facebook. You can also join our Strava club by searching Marathon Talk in the club section. We'll be sharing more content there, along with challenges and more over the next coming weeks.
Thanks for listening. We'll return for a special Boston Marathon preview in 2 weeks' time, where I speak to a very special guest, the legend of the sport. He is all things Boston and will have some great knowledge to share with you. From sunny Southern California, it's goodbye from me.
And from the less sunny south of England, it's goodbye from me. Enjoy the run wherever it takes you.